During my time being quarantined in my house, I dreamed up many coaster trips I would take once parks opened back up. In June, one of those planned trips finally happened. A 2-part coaster trip that would see me visit a total of 7 parks in 6 states. This video is a highlight of my experience during part 1 of this 2-part trip. The first park on this trip was Alabama Splash Adventure in Bessemer, Alabama. I had only found out about this park a few weeks prior to this trip, so it was a total last-minute add-on. The park only has one coaster. It's a CCI wooden coaster opened in 1998 and restored in 2015 called Rampage. And because it was on the predetermined route, I added Alabama Splash Adventure to the itinerary. The plan was to do a mini marathon on Rampage and get back on the road. I got to the park approximately 30 minutes prior to opening. Parking was free, which is always a great thing. As I walked in at rope drop, I was the only one going towards Rampage, which was a good sign for re-rides. I did a total of 5 rides on Rampage, both in the front and back. In the back, you get hurled over that first drop, and this ride pulls great laterals and has a unique ending that sees the train descend back into the station. The ride-op, by the way, was super enthusiastic and made the experience that much more fun.
First gate's check, we're gonna be all clear. That means you are out of here. Celebrate, hold on tight, and enjoy your ground.
I ended up spending 2 hours here before picking up a t-shirt and getting back on the road to head towards Arkansas for Magic Springs. So if you're in Bessemer, it's worth stopping by to pick up this awesome credit. Along the way, I stopped at one of my favorite restaurants, Whataburger, and this line was atrocious. It backed up into the street and gave the impression that there were 2 lines, when in reality there wasn't. Once you're in line, there was no getting out. After 30 minutes, I finally got my food and was on my way. I stopped at an Aloft Hotel in Arkansas, which has quickly become one of my favorite hotel brands. They have pool tables in the lobby, and thankfully they were open for public use. The next morning, I drove 1 more hour to Magic Springs in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I heard some pretty interesting things about this park before visiting, but I went in with an open mind and a readiness to pick up 4 new credits, including the rare credit X Coaster. I got to the park about 30 minutes before opening, and parking, it was $15, and there was a long line already formed to get into the park gates. I made my way towards the back of the park to get the credit on X Coaster, a Moorer Sky Loop which I believe is the only one of its kind in the United States. The highlight of this coaster is ascending the 150-foot lift at 90 degrees. You then get 5 seconds of insane hang time, only being secured with just a lap bar and a seat belt, followed by a heartline roll and a drop. My only wish is that the ride went through 1 more cycle. My next credit was the Aero Mine Train Big Bad John. Now this ride gets points for its name alone, and it's worth mentioning that the ride ops gave you a dollop of hand sanitizer before every ride. After Big Bad John, I held my breath and began the walk towards the Gauntlet, their Vekoma SLC. It had been many years since my last SLC, and I knew the general consensus was not positive. But again, I went in with an open mind, which got mercilessly rattled between the bulky restraints in the back row. The first drop was very shallow, and every transition made my head feel like a kick drum being played at death metal speeds. As I rebuild my coaster count and coaster rankings, this coaster settled nicely at the bottom. At this point, I had knocked out 3 credits in 1 hour with only 1 more left, Arkansas Twister, and the ride ops told me the coaster would open at 12, but it didn't open until 12:45. And finding Arkansas Twister can be a challenge because you have to go through the water park, and it's not necessarily intuitive to do that, but fortunately, I stumbled upon it. Now, I was assigned the front seat, and I had a really underwhelming ride. The views at the turnaround were amazing, but this ride was really rough in spots and it crawled over its airtime hills. I ended up foregoing re-rides as X Coaster was closed when I went back, and I decided I wanted to begin the trip to Missouri, where Silver Dollar City would be waiting for me the next day. I don't think I'd go out of my way to visit Magic Springs again, but I can understand the appeal of wanting to pick up the X Coaster credit. On the 4-hour drive to Branson, I stopped at one of my favorite pizza places, Hideaway Pizza, and I've only seen these in Oklahoma, so to run across one in Arkansas was a pleasant surprise, and it did not disappoint. As I rolled into Branson, I saw a mountain coaster I was tempted to try out, but I was so tired and I wanted to be rested up, so I called it a night. After spending time at some smaller parks, it was time for Silver Dollar City. At Silver Dollar City, you have the option of free parking or paid premium parking. I'm cheap, so I took the free parking and got some steps in. This was the first park that required face coverings and performed health screenings, so I arrived an hour early to account for the new protocol. And upon entering the park and exploring around before opening, I couldn't help but think that this was already one of the best theme parks not named Disney. I downloaded the park app and found out that Wildfire, the park's B&M sit-down coaster, was closed for the day, which was really my first big letdown of the trip. I then hurried to Powder Keg, which had already developed a long line and wasn't operating and open. The nearest ride was Fire in the Hole, so I got in line to get the credit. This is basically Blazing Fury at Dollywood, except with a splashdown finale. However, many of the animatronics were hard to hear and the building smelled very funny. I then walked over to Time Traveler, their Mock Ride's extreme spinning coaster, and was surprised to find a very short 5-minute wait. Time Traveler has a very well-themed queue, and at one point you stand near a window behind the first drop, which is a great place for photos and videos. I got my dollop of hand sanitizer and asked for the back row, which is where this ride needs to be experienced. The first drop occurs right out of the station, and the ride is graceful and maintains a good pace throughout, with multiple launches and inversions. Between the drop, launches, spinning that doesn't feel like spinning, and scenery, this ride is a top-tier experience. Next, I checked out Thunderation, the park's mine train, and for a mine train, this ride packs a lot of punch. At the end of the ride, you ascend a tall lift and proceed into one final burst of speed that leads you into the brake run. I walked away thinking this was my highest rated mine train. After getting turned around multiple times, I finally found Outlaw Run, one of the first RMCs. I got the middle row and walked away thinking that the 162-foot drop, the wave turn, and the double barrel roll finale were the highlights of this coaster. I feel like it's rougher than I expected for an RMC and probably falls slightly behind Twisted Cyclone in my RMC rankings. My last credit was Powder Keg, and this line was lethargically slow. I waited 80 minutes for one ride. Now, it should be noted that during this trip, due to social distancing, most trains were skipping 1 or 2 rows, but this didn't seem to affect overall wait times that much. Here, they were running one train, and the ride ops appeared to disinfect the trains much more frequently than the other rides. It was extremely hard to get good off-ride photos and videos, not just for this ride, but for most rides at Silver Dollar City. Now, Powder Keg has a great launch and some magnificent floater airtime, but I could not stomach another 80-minute wait, so I went back to Marathon Time Traveler before going souvenir hunting. Looking back, this park's coaster count isn't overwhelming, but not counting Fire in the Hole, the collection is extremely solid, with Time Traveler leading the pack. I wish I could have experienced Wildfire, but that'll give me incentive to come back. It really would be nice if Hirsch and Family Entertainment offered a pass similar to, say, Six Flags membership or Cedar Fair's Platinum Pass that gets you into all of their parks. I stopped at another Fairfield Inn in Missouri to break up the 10.5-hour drive that would take me all the way to Dollywood. On the long drive to Pigeon Forge, I listened to several albums like Fleetwood Mac's The Dance, Hillsong United's The I Heart Revolution, and Switchfoot's Vice Verses, along with one really good audiobook called Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. When I arrived in Pigeon Forge, I tried out 2 of their mountain coasters, Rocky Top and the Smoky Mountain Alpine Coaster. While both experiences were largely the same, Rocky Top had great scenery and multiple lifts and sections of coasting, while the Smoky Mountain Alpine Coaster had one continuous lift and descent, which I preferred. Both rides were fun, but expensive for the experience they provided. This was the night before my birthday, so I treated myself to TGI Fridays chocolate brownie ice cream dessert, which was surprisingly delicious. So for the final day of part 1 of my June coaster trip, I visited Dollywood on a day threatened by rain. My only other visit to Dollywood came in 2017, and Lightning Rod was closed, so I crossed my fingers and hoped for better luck. Because I had a 4.5-hour drive back to Atlanta, I purchased the Time Saver Pass to ensure I could get all the credits and re-rides on Lightning Rod. So here are some of my quick thoughts from the day. Lightning Rod was incredible, and of my ranked RMCs, it quickly took the number 1 spot, and no, Steel Vengeance has not been currently ranked by me. There's not really one element of Lightning Rod that stands out because they all really blur together into one magical experience that's over before you know it. But when it's over, you don't feel cheated. It's the perfect length for what it does. But if I had to pick a standout element, I'd go with the quad down finale. Now for a come down, I went to Blazing Fury, only for the credit, and then checked out Arrow's Last Stand, for their standard loopers at least, Tennessee Tornado. Arrow loopers are great to look at, but I often find myself ranking them lower than I want to because the experience is generally short and or rough. See Canyon Blaster, for example, from the Adventure Dome. Tennessee Tornado for an arrow looper was extremely smooth, but it was extremely short too. Wild Eagle overtook Gatekeeper as my favorite B&M wing coaster, but I plan to ride Thunderbird at Holiday World soon, so maybe that will change. Wild Eagle is another example of a Dollywood ride that makes great use of its terrain. Hitting up the coasters by proximity, I checked out Fire Chaser Express, which features a great launch out of the station. Mystery Mine was next, and this ended up being a tale of two rides. The first half is very choppy and operates like a thrilling family coaster, and the second half features some incredible special effects before kicking into high gear, but unfortunately, the ride ends quickly after that. Thunderhead provided some great moments of ejector, and Dragonflyer, really it was a ride that underpromised and over-delivered. I ended up getting several re-rides on Lightning Rod and one re-ride on Tennessee Tornado and Fire Chaser Express before the rain cut the day short. I grabbed my souvenirs and headed home to bring the first part of my 2-part coaster trip to a close. So in conclusion, here's my final thoughts. Overall, in a trip filled with some amazing coasters, Lightning Rod totally lived up to the hype and was the standout credit. Silver Dollar City was the best all-around park, and also it had a beyond solid coaster collection. Rampage is a hidden gem in Alabama, and X Coaster was the most unique credit. So there you go. That's going to do it for this trip recap. Stay tuned for the recap of the second half of this trip, which will feature my time at Six Flags St. Louis, Holiday World, and Kentucky Kingdom. Thanks for watching.